Okay, let's jump right into a foundational concept of modern government, the separation of powers. Now, this is a key term in any political science course, right? It's this big idea that shapes entire nations. But it's also a constant, dynamic struggle, an unseen battle that really defines the limits of political authority. I mean, this is the fundamental dilemma, isn't it? It's the puzzle that philosophers and the founders of nations have wrestled with for centuries. If you give a government too little power, it can't get anything done. But give it too much, and you risk creating a tyranny. So what's the answer? Well, the classic answer is this pretty elegant doctrine. The core idea is actually simple. Concentrated power is dangerous, so you don't put all your eggs in one basket. Instead, you design a system where power is deliberately split up, forcing different parts of the government to work together and, most importantly, to keep each other in check. So here's what we're going to cover today. We'll look at the problem of power itself, check out a few different blueprints for how governments are set up, and then take a deep dive into India's unique balancing act. And stick around, because we're also going to reveal a surprising force from the world of international relations that has shaped this whole thing all along.
All right, let's start at the beginning with the core idea. And for that, we have to talk about the French philosopher Montesquieu. He's the guy who really famously laid this all out. He looked at governments around the world and saw this one universal risk.
He argued that your liberty is basically toast if the power to make the laws, enforce the laws, and judge you based on those laws are all in the same hands. I mean, think about it. If one person can write the rules, carry them out, and be the judge of whether you broke them, there's just no protection. It's a recipe for tyranny. So what was his solution? Divide and conquer. Split the government into 3 distinct branches, each with its own job to do. You've got the legislature to make the laws, the executive to carry them out, and the judiciary to interpret them. Simple, right? Each one stays in its own lane, creating a natural tension and balance. Okay, so that's the theory. But, theory is one thing. What happens when the rubber meets the road and you actually try to build a government this way? Well, it turns out there isn't just one way to do it. In the real world, countries have basically developed 2 main flavors. On one hand, you've got the rigid model, like in the United States. The Constitution draws these really clear, hard lines. Congress gets legislative power, the president gets executive power, the courts get judicial power. End of story. But then you have looser systems, like in the UK and India, where things are more fused. The executive branch is actually drawn from the legislature, which creates this intentional overlap. Now, what's really fascinating about the US model, which was largely designed by James Madison, is how it views conflict. You might think that political gridlock, where nothing gets done, is a bug, a system failure, right? Nope. To Madison, that was a feature. He thought gridlock was a sign that the system was working, that it was preventing any one group or a tyranny of the majority from just steamrolling everyone else. It's friction by design. But not everybody follows those 2 paths. India offers this really fascinating third way. It's a unique model that isn't about strict separation. Instead, it's about functional overlap and this complex web of checks and balances. Think less about walls and more about a constant managed conversation. And this diagram just illustrates the Indian system perfectly. Just look at how all those arrows flow. The legislator checks the executive, sure, but the executive also checks the legislator. The judiciary checks both of them, but it's also checked by both of them. It's not a wall separating the branches, it's this constant dance of control and oversight. And you see this overlap everywhere. The judiciary can literally strike down laws passed by the legislature. The legislature can impeach judges. The executive can even issue these things called ordinances, which are basically temporary laws. So as India's Supreme Court put it, there's separation of powers in a broad sense only. Everybody's got a finger in everybody else's pie. So we have these established models, rigid and loose. But what if the rulebook we've all been reading has a hidden chapter? What if there's a force from outside a country's borders that's been shaping this very domestic concept of government all along? This is where international relations really throws a wrench in the works. This question has really puzzled scholars for a long time. If you look at the US president's power, especially in foreign policy, it has grown way beyond what the Constitution seems to grant on paper. There's a big gap between the text and the reality of how things work. So, what happened? And the answer, believe it or not, lies in the realm of international law. Historically, the law of nations served as this kind of alternative source of legitimacy for a president's actions. When the constitutional grounds for doing something were maybe a little shaky, international law provided another justification.
This quote just nails it. Presidents would argue they were simply fulfilling their duty to uphold international law. But every single time they did that, they created a new precedent. Those actions, which were first justified by international duty, eventually just became accepted as inherent constitutional powers. That path of duty really did become a road to power. And here's the crucial point. We are left with this expanded power, but we've forgotten where it came from. Today, these powerful actions are just justified by saying, well, that's what we did in the past. The original reasons, the ones rooted in international law that also had built-in limits, they've been forgotten. It's like being handed a powerful tool without the instruction manual that tells you how to use it safely. So, all of this brings us to today, where this foundational doctrine, this beautiful, carefully constructed system, is facing some new and really powerful challenges all over the globe. That careful balance is, well, it's starting to wobble. In India, for example, critics are pointing to issues that blur the lines in a dangerous way. You have the executive maybe overusing those temporary ordinances to bypass the legislature. You have the judiciary sometimes getting accused of overreach, making policy from the bench. And then you have the legislature finding clever ways to shield its laws from judicial review. Each little thing erodes that delicate balance. And in the US, you've got a different kind of challenge, but it's just as serious. Hyperpartisanship. When loyalty to your political party becomes more important than your loyalty to your branch of government, the whole system of checks and balances just starts to fall apart. Congress's main job is to check the executive, but that becomes really hard when its members care more about their party's agenda than their institutional duty. Which leaves us with this huge, critical question for our interconnected world. The whole idea of separation of powers was designed for the nation-state. But today, power flows across borders. It's wielded by multinational corporations, by international bodies, through global networks. So is a purely domestic system of checks and balances even enough to constrain power in the 21st century? That is the unseen battle for balance today.